Alô?
Você acha que ele não estava perto de semana passada? O material era bota, né? Ninguém sabia até então que era se
Bom, vamos dar início.
Well, let's start.
Primeiro queria agradecer
First of all, I want to thank you all for being here
e dizer da
and
alegria que nós tivemos de ter participado
say how happy we are to have participated at COP
Eu acho que
Belém.
foi uma COP do setor
It
privado.
was a private sector COP.
Muito nessa COP.
The private sector was very present in this COP, brought lots of results, lots of new projects. And we understand that the NDCs and the commitments of the countries
Estão num momento dificílimo, né?
are
Depende da
in a
capacidade política do Brasil, não depende
hard moment. It doesn't depend on the political capacity of
do
Brazil,
presidente da COP, do
from the COP president or Itamaraty. It depends on a geopolitical
COP,
situation that goes beyond COP and
que
is linked to other issues, and that right now they are being prioritized. So, facing the objective side of this COP, I particularly saw some advancements in terms of the attitudes of companies and the government, because although negotiation itself will not have major advancements, but the governments did advancements. They presented several programs, several projects, several activities. Then I leave and I got happy with the results. And another point that I'd like to emphasize are the measures of mitigation. It was a COP that was more balanced in terms of mitigation and adaptation, a concern that was more present from all participants with what we will need to do as a society and humanity to live and bear the climate state that is present on a daily basis. And also, from the side of the insurers, we are happy in terms of setting a wide variety of partnerships with a vision that is a transversal and amplified one on the role of insurance inside several activities in the economy, in the life of societies, and we actually have an outcome that is a homework for all. And I will be very happy that you actually charge me to advance on all these topics in the future. And that's why we are having this round table to talk, to listen. All the participants who were with us throughout these 2 weeks with us. The idea is to hear our ambition post-COP, the challenges that the insurance sector can help make feasible in the other sectors, and how we can start to project or design our roadmap towards Turkey. So now we have Turkey, and what will be the work from Belém towards Turkey? And I'd like to set a provocation. Butch and we've spoken, and I do believe that we have to create a global task force from the role of insurance regarding sustainability. We should develop the major global leaders for insurance on the main entities that represent our sector, and connect this group actually with the stakeholders who are dealing in a direct way, and also the ones that have a major capacity to influence the decisions and the policies that will affect all the solutions, the paths that are necessary in this way. So this is a challenge we should impose ourselves or stand, because I'm convinced that the insurance sector has an important role to play, both for mitigation, in the mitigation agenda, and in the adaptation agenda. Also, I'm convinced that the insurance sector, the companies, the legislative sector are engaged. They are willing to participate in this movement, also willing to contribute. I'm not sure how they are translating this, but in Portuguese we would say we are putting the will together with the efforts. I'm doing my best to translate literally what he said. So when people want and put efforts together. So and the objective today is an invitation for provocation, suggestions, so that we can think about what we will do from now on. And now, Butch, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jogo, and welcome everyone to the third and final day of the COP30 Global Sustainable Insurance Summit. I think this setup is really purposeful. It allows us to pause and reflect on what has happened the past couple of weeks. And I've actually been doing a lot of reflecting, not just the past few days, but the past few months already, just preparing myself for Belém. I think I'm gonna share my views on what I've experienced over the years on climate and the COPs, and also the insurance industry on the other hand. And what I'm seeing is that there is a global convergence between the COPs and the insurance industry. Let me start by saying a few things about the COP. I think people can have different views on the COPs on climate, but also on nature and desertification. But we have to understand what it has done. For me, COPs I see them as a floor and not as a ceiling. It is a foundation on which the world can move forward on climate action rather than the ceiling itself. So without COPs, what science is showing us is that we would be heading towards a almost 5-degree centigrade world. That's an impossible future for all of us. And so we are starting to bend the curve, but it's not enough. And science is saying that we need to move exponentially to get to keep 1.5 degrees alive. Secondly, COP started with largely states and member states of the UN. But about 20 years ago, the finance ministry started to be involved. I thought that was an important moment because there was a growing view that we cannot achieve our climate goals without the role of finance, be it on investment, lending, insurance, also public and private finance. And then on the road to Paris and COP21, there was a growing voice from the global insurance industry to ensure that we try to be as ambitious as possible, both on temperature goals and adaptation goals. Which brings us now to Belém, where I think compared to previous COPs, the insurance voice, not just here in the House of Insurance, but also in the blue zone and the green zone, has been more prominent and recognized. So let me go to the insurance side. I think for the global mutirao for the global insurance industry happened in Rio in 2012 when we launched the UN Principles for Stable Insurance. And we knew that was significant, not only because of the principles themselves, but that moment was an important moment for the global insurance industry because it showed that it was willing to be part of the global solution to climate change. And 2012 was the year that the Rio +20 conference happened. What that signified was that it was the 20th anniversary of the Rio Conventions on the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, and the UN Convention to combat desertification. So for me, the global movement already started there. And from there, we have shaped a narrative and a compelling purpose for the global insurance industry, using its roles as a risk manager, a risk carrier, an investor to really not only address climate action, but over time address also issues like nature and biodiversity, inequality, and human rights as well. So the principles for stable insurance have now mobilized that global movement of around 300 organizations across the globe. It is the largest collaborative initiative between the UN and the global insurance industry, which brings me to another point in the journey of sustainable insurance is that over time, we have also developed and expanded the role of insurance, that the role of insurance is not only about adaptation and resilience. We need to definitely build on that, but it could also play a role in supporting the transition to a net zero economy. So the role of insurers as insurers and investors in decarbonization, and the role of insurers as in halting and reversing nature laws. And this is why that global movement has also created concepts about net zero insurance, transition insurance, and nature positive insurance, which brings me to the next point in time, which is this summit in Belém. I do think that this is the most important UN event for insurance ever since the principles for stable insurance were born during the UN conference on sustainable development in 2012 in Rio. And I think we are sensing in many ways what needs to be done going forward. We know that science is telling us that whatever insurers have done over the years, it hasn't been enough. And so with governments, the same with banks, the same with civil society. If it were enough, then science would be showing us that should be turning the corner already. So I think for all the efforts of humanity combined, what we need to recognize is that it hasn't been enough. It doesn't mean that people are not doing anything. I think we can already say that climate action, both on adaptation and mitigation, is going to be irreversible. The thing that matters most is that how can we accelerate and scale it so that we can avert the worst impacts of climate change. And so this is where I think we need to get moving. The global insurance industry, if you look back in time, first warned about climate change half a century ago. That's a lot of foresight in terms of potential of understanding science and how it could impact humanity. And I think this is a moment in time for the global insurance industry again to come together. I totally support Joga's remarks earlier. As we heard from Laurence Tobiana during the day one of the global summit, I think there is, and in our many engagements here at COP30 in the blue zone, the green zone, in the House of Insurance, there is now a widespread support for the creation of the International Task Force on Climate Resilience and Transition Insurance. And this is our way forward to galvanize the global insurance industry and make sure that COP31 is even more impactful for all of us.
Obrigada, Butch.
Thank you, Butch. I'll moderate. I'll be the moderator together with Butch. I will try to cover the our time, our schedule. We have several people from several sectors. And as Diogo said, your perceptions from COP, and for next year, how can the insurance sector contribute for that? We will start with Claire, the Director of Climate from TNC. She will be the first. We have 5 minutes per person. Victoria will be actually timing. We have this time control, let's say. So thank you, Claire. The floor is yours, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. So yes, it's. I think this has been is a very significant COP. We haven't quite finished yet. It feels like there's a lot of work happening just over the road there. And we're going after 2 years of middling ambition, shall we say, in COPs. We have had the Brazil really lift the bar in so many areas. It's for somebody who's been going and following this since the beginning, pretty much. It's been moments where the hair on the back of your neck is standing up and going, "Is this really happening?" So it's good. How much lands today is unclear, but I think the point is that it creates a call to action for non-state actors like the insurance industry to really step up. I also think it's interesting. I mean, yes, Turkey's got the next COP, but Australia is planning to be the runner of the process. In that case, we can expect a lot of what Brazil has put into place and raised in importance to actually be followed through there. And even more incitingly, we know that Ethiopia will follow, and they are very focused on adaptation, and they are very focused on a lot of the issues that Brazil has centered. So I think we'll see how Australia does with this strange mix with Turkey. No idea. They'll do their best, I'm sure. But then we know we've got Ethiopia following that. So we've got a clear runway of 2 years to follow up on Brazil's agenda. And it's a truly exciting agenda. For this group, one of the most essential things is this Belém mission to 1.5. Stabilizing climate is going to decide how easy it is to close the protection gap within insurance. It's also going to decide the costs. It's going to decide so many factors. So that seems to be something that at a political level is essential that we lean into. But it's also coming from the Nature Conservancy, I would of course say this, but bear with me. Nature's role in stabilizing climate, we know that nature can reduce emissions through turning carbon into sinks at around a third of what we need. So we need 60% more ambition to achieve 1.5. We actually now know the science is telling us that stabilizing at 1.5 is insufficient. If we want to maintain our weather systems as they stand right now, we actually have to come down to below 1 to stabilize below 1. So we have a lot of work to do. And when nature is playing a role to stabilize climate, it's also reducing the impact of climate and enabling adaptation. The role of nature is particularly critical in reducing the overshoot in the 1.5. Without that, the overshoot will be bigger and longer. Now, why am I talking to you all about nature? Is because the reason that nature is not being centered more outside, I mean, Brazil has done an amazing job at centering it, but the reason that we're having such pushback is around the reversal risk. So in the carbon terms, people are so concerned that climate impacts will actually reduce the ability of the current carbon sinks, forests, peatlands, oceans to maintain that. Insurance can play a huge role in reducing people's concern around this permanence issue. And there are many very exciting innovations being put on the table right now. And in every single one of them, insurance has a role. So I think there's a lot that insurance can do in that Belém mission to 1.5. There's also a really important element of the Mutarao that's been put on the table is the work program for the roadmap from Baku to Belém. we're all, for those of us who have been tracking this and thinking about this in terms of vulnerable countries, we're all delighted to see the tripling adaptation point in there. But we know that the donor countries are really struggling right now to find additional grant finance. So we're going to have to find ways of bringing more private finance in. And one of the ways that we can bring private finance in is through working closely with the insurance industry. Because first of all, we can de-risk investment into enterprise that is climate and nature positive. Secondly, the insurance industry can help us quantify these risks and how to adapt to them, what the role of green infrastructure can play in reducing climate risks, and then look at getting that into the bank, the ways that the bank are assessing finance, the ways that the ministries of finance are looking at their assets and quantifying their assets. At TNC, we've been talking a lot about natural asset insurance, where we're looking at a landscape and looking at the role that insurance can play as part of restoring that green infrastructure, should it be damaged from fire or flood or storm, but also de-risking the investments into enterprise in that landscape. And again, that's that way of creating a package, almost a club for good behavior, is something that we think there's huge potential in. I'm running out of time, so I'm gonna just finish on saying that in the fossil fuel phase out, where we're going to really struggle to keep that language today, I believe, or today and tomorrow, depending on how it goes. There is also a huge potential for insurance to de-risk the process. But what I think has been particularly special about this COP has been how bottom-up it's been, how inclusive it's been, how many dialogues there have been. And I really hope that we can continue that type of process within different countries, around the country platforms or the country packages, depending on whether you're thinking about this as climate or biodiversity. But bringing that convergence together, making it easier for governments to understand what they can do to really drive ambition, what they can do to really attract private investors, and how they can work with their insurance industry, both in regulation and setting the bar in the right way to bring you in the right ways, but also looking at the roles for de-risking the investment that they need. So I'm delighted to hear there's a plan for a task force. I think that's excellent. And I would encourage you to do that, not just at an international level, to be really looking at national level, where we can really work with governments and demonstrate what good looks like. Thank you.
Muito obrigada, Claire, pela sua contribuição. Eu só queria lembrar a todos.
Claire, thank you so much for your contribution. I just want to say that it's been recorded both in English and in Portuguese, and at the end, we will offer you a summary of all this. Now, Ivo, our Superintendent of Sustainability from AFRI, the same questions. The floor is yours. Well, thinking about what we could discuss here, I divided in 3 points. The first point I'd like to talk about is when I was a student of environmental management, there was a concept about responsibility, common responsibility, but shared responsibility. And this is what Claire said. Several people from several sectors, insurers, representatives from different classes, enterprises, the government was here discussing on a high level how insurance can be a finance mechanisms to fight or to help the climate adaptation. And I believe that we found a good way to bring and to converge projects, and we have a new product maybe here, so we fulfilled in being the implementation COP. And the second point is that we consolidate here insurance as a factor that is a main and relevant one in this discussion, bringing people, studies, and mainly understanding that while we are managing risks, risk management can contribute to fight climate changes. And as Butch said, engagement. Engagement is what we try to do, and this is core, this is paramount. If we are not working together, if we don't contribute, it will be very difficult to reach positive results, and all of us will suffer at the end. So if we are all aligned, talking in a mature way, this is very relevant. And then the insurance market goes to another level, to a higher level, talking about climate changes. And my third point is that the insurance sector and the enterprise sector needed this. We've been working on this PSI for years to have things materialized, and now Casa dos Seguros brought examples, projects, initiatives that are relevant to fight climate changes, and these shows the work that CNseg has been done for years. So I want to congratulate all of you. And we lived Casa dos Seguros in a very intense way throughout these 10 days, but it actually fulfilled a lot, all my expectations. And we had great points being seen and discussed and overviewed here. So now I'm expecting for the future steps, and Mafri and the Brazilian market is moving forward. And this is not only one result, it's just one stage of a journey that has been built for years. Thank you, Ivo. We will hear André from the government side, MMA, who has worked intensely on his report, and we can hear. Thank you, Claudia. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Diogo, for inviting me. I had the honor to be on a panel this week, and before sharing my remarks, but on behalf of the Ministry of the Environment, I want to say that we are very sorry for the ones who are injured due to the incident of the fire yesterday, and we are thankful for the firefighters who helped yesterday, and all the ones who were involved in the rescue. The local people also helped a lot, so I'm very thankful for that. And if I could summarize in 3 words what I see from the COP and to the future, I see success. Some has already been said, some of the milestones and some advancements. The first, the text that we could read on the Anglo adaptation, I consider that a very important text, showing that we have advanced a lot and giving metrics and an approach and a coverage that we didn't have before, highlighting the insurance sector, and something that Butch shared. But when we think about insurance, there is one factor called synergies. When we think about synergies, we have biodiversity, we have climate, and we have to observe what is happening. I understand that the insurance sector will have to follow these points. Also, another success from this COP was the delivery of the roadmap to Belém, the $1.3 billion. And I could read the report. There are 2 things: the expectations and the hope, how the insurance sector will help on the funding and finding more funding, and this is very important. And as we are talking about roadmap, another important point on this final race, let's say, the fossil fuel, this is paramount. On the text that we could read, and it was launched from yesterday to today, that was taken apart, but I expect that to be included again because it's very important. Why is it important? Because we don't want a transition roadmap. We want to start a process to discuss that, and discussing that is paramount. If we take 2024, the fossil fuel consumption, charcoal, oil was 31 times above the renewable fuel consumption, solar and wind. So what we are noticing is that there is a growing or increasing demand of consumption. So if we look the 19 months of average temperature, it exceeded 1.5 degrees, and 2024 was the year where for the first time on average, we exceeded 1.5 degrees. So we have to try to find a way, as Minister Mariana, we are trying to find a mark together with the new sector, but going towards the transition from the fossil fuels. And this will be part of our work. And another measure, I know I'm using my time, was tropical forest facilities, PFF, that we launched, and it mobilized $7 billion. This value is very important because we have around $80 billion for forest funding, and the majority of it is from the public sector, but we need the private sector on it also. And when we look to the climate desertification agenda, we have to consider for more than $400 billion for 2050. So we need a huge amount of funds. So Claude, you mentioned the study. I was in the planning ministry before returning to MMA, but in the long term, we did the inaction of climate study. So we actually analyzed 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees, and 4 degrees. 4 degrees is inaction scenario. And this week, on that 4-degree scenario, what we found was that if we go towards this scenario, the accumulated GDP loss is around 17 trillion reais until 2050. So divided by an amount of years, it's around 600 billion losses in this scenario. And in the 1.5 degrees, we will have an increase of 6.7 trillion in the Brazilian economy. So we can accelerate our climate plan. So working to the 1.5 degrees will lead to GDP gains, and we will gain in jobs and employment as well. So when we talk about these degrees, 1.5 degrees for Brazil means an average heat of 2 to 3 degrees in the Northeast region. This is a scientific study, so it's important that you keep this in mind. So think about products and different approaches for the Brazilian territory. And in terms of challenges, and I'm already closing my talk, I have 3 major challenges for the insurance sector. So first, we have a possibility to leverage investments to reduce risks. We have the carbon market, the regulated one and the volunteer one, where we will need to have insurance. Today, when I read the last report of CNseg, they wanted to regulate 2%, and that's very low. It's low compared to the Brazilian average. So how are we thinking that for the forest sector in terms of projects, carbon? We are giving support to projects as well. We also have to think about properties. We also have to look towards bioeconomy. How are we going to guarantee that the production for that parcel of the population will be guaranteed. We have to understand that that is very close to poverty. And to close my talk, the infrastructure. Today, we have a stock around 20 to 40% of the GDP. It's a reasonable structure, but we would have to have 60 or 65%, and then I would have to double-fold investments in infrastructure, which is around 1.8 of the GDP. How do I do that? With resilience, looking not only to the past, but looking towards the future. And then the insurance sector will have a lot of important work to do. And at last, insurance sector will be important to mobilize assets or wealth. Brazil is growing. We will have an increase of capital in our economy. And Diogo, I liked your idea of having this workforce and a roadmap that there is. How are we going to increase the coverage and attack the different fronts that we have in our sector, and actually bringing different sectors of civil society, companies that are not insurance companies. Sometimes it's paramount, so that we can create a momentum for this climate possibilities.
So we have launched products for the forest, and that's going to be very important to give momentum to the funding. We have 12 million hectares to restore, and I think they're going to contribute towards this. The financial sector is beginning to fund private projects, as you said. So the non-reimbursable projects, that's what we had up to now, but now the insurance sector is helping this new process. And we have the insurance market to enhance the coverage in Brazil. And the study that we launched in Brazil is important because it's an X-ray for that. And we're working on it to really try and enhance the coverage. It's a huge challenge. And I'm going to give the word to Victoria, who is from EEX, and she works with decarbonization in the industries. And she's going to talk about the transition from fossil fuels and what did you think of COP and the insurance market that will help it. So 5 minutes, because you were not here in the beginning. We're regulating time, and Victoria is circulating and controlling the time. All right? Okay. Yeah, Victoria's here. All right. So good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm Victoria. I'm the Director of Energy and Philanthropy in Brazil that works for 10 years in Brazil. Same thing with the Treaty of Paris, according to the Treaty of Paris. And we also have the expectation of at least a small advance in the construction of a roadmap in terms of fossil fuels, and we hope that this is effective in this fair transition. But I'd like to highlight that this COP is marking a convergence of the role of international commerce in the climatic agenda, and also the role of the geographies that have comparative advantages that became evident and that need to be used so that we can accelerate decarbonization, accelerate mitigation, as well as promoting a better sharing of the benefits that this transition can bring. So in this COP, we had Belém Declaration that is focused on the industrialization of the regions where natural resources are. We had the launch of the Integrated Forum, Change in Climate and Commerce, that is also focused on the trading agenda, and it is being penalized lately. So today we have more than 200 barriers in terms of international commerce, and commerce is extremely important. So it's important to have the demand for decarbonized products. So in COP, we also saw the launch of the initiative of the Alliance. So the Global South for climatic entrepreneurship. That's also very important to give value to the resources and the technological innovations that happen in the territories where we have natural resources. So there's a set of deliveries that were made in this COP, and this reinforces the thesis that the Institute and society will move forward, and it's the power shoring role. So in territories where we have great availability of renewable resources in terms of clean and energy, as well as biofuels and wind energy and solar energy, we have to unlock this agenda. And the insurance sector is extremely important because these are investments in green siderurgy or the production of green fertilizers, advanced fuels like methanol refa, and they are for aviation and maritime fuels. These are extremely capital intensive projects subject to technological risks and regulatory risks because they are located in territories in the global south. So the insurance companies have a very important role to unlock this funding, allowing long-term contracts that are going to give us the investment that is important, and finally, reducing, as a result, the capital costs. So these are very positive points, and they also bring the importance of the insurance company for decarbonization in the energy sector, especially in the developing countries. Thank you very much. Wow, that was great. Your timing was great. Definitely in the average. So, Marcelo, thank you very much for coming, and we had the opportunity to meet here in our discussion. So Marcelo was sent especially because of bioeconomy, and Vitória and they talked a little bit about bioeconomy, and Claire did as well. So what did you think of COP and the next things that we're going to do, the next steps that we're going to do this year? Thank you, Marcelo. Thank you, Claudia. Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I worked when the dinosaurs were still flying in the government, so an FGV where I was in the climate governance project, and with the people from CEDEX who are here as well. I make a bridge between the global private sector and the Brazilian private sector, and Juliana, who's behind you, is from CEDES, and she also coordinates this part of the insurance companies. So that was a long introduction. But anyway, I'm going to try and bring together the world of bioeconomy, the COP world. So first of all, it's great that yesterday everything worked out. Nobody was hurt, nothing very serious, and it shows the importance of insurance and the importance of the need to foresee events that that are not completely asymmetrical. And, we have to have prevention for all of this. But I'm very happy that today everything is calm. So I'm going to work on 3 points. The first one is COP as a whole and the plans, the roadmaps. I think there are 3 roadmaps that the Brazilian presidency presented, and some of them will work and others will work as a basis for future flights. So the most important one is funding of the insurance sector, first of all. Definitely, it's the biggest ally for us to be able to structure the private and public sector for this transition, because we're going to need a lot of insurance. There are many mechanisms, and Professor Watson said, now there's a science pavilion, right? They talk about the limits of the planet, and the industry is basically a mitigator of these planet limits because they hold it and they don't allow you to go past them. And when you pass them, they become deficient. So the industry is extremely interested in maintaining the limits. And for this, the funding mechanisms are absolutely central. So the insurance industry, I understand that it is extremely interested in offering solutions, because solutions, above all here in Brazil, when we talk about the second way, which is the one that was proposed for deforestation, and it's a central path, because around the world, 70% of the emissions come from energy in the field. In Brazil, it's the use of the land, definitely. So we have worked a lot to guarantee mechanisms of making funding more robust, also integration of new solutions in the agri world, including the forest and livestock and agriculture, and definitely that's very important. And the third roadmap is the one that is fundamental for the transition. So not using renewable fossil fuels anymore, and that was in COP1, and this is what they were proposing, and we've been bringing solutions for 30 years, and I think we already have something that is fundamental, having 80 countries that already agree with this. So I think it would be impossible for us to, land this now, because many countries live from oil, but the subsidies are going to change. So they're going to go into the agricultural world, they're going to go into the biological solutions, and in the insurance companies are also going to support this process, because it's going to be it's going to have greater momentum to leverage a new economy. There's a lot to say, in a very short time. I just wanted to say two quick things. So in COP, we launched the Bioeconomy Challenge. So we are structuring metrics, markets, and the relationship with communities and funding. And in the funding chapter, I think it's extremely important to have the insurance industry inside this, so that we can, build things and see how we're going to make this ranking, the cycle of 3 years of COP that are going to come with the Brazilian, the Australian governments, and we're going to deliver all of this very clearly with metrics for nature. And finally, TFF, it's going to bring a new condition for working. So it's not only conserving the forests in public areas, but also in communities. And also, I think that we're in a world where we have new climatic funding. Brazil has put forests in the middle of this, and we're going to come up with the solutions that are going to help us follow this path. And our central partner is, insurance, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you. Thank you, Marcelo. So since we talk a little bit about the agri-business, so I'm going to pass it over to you, Guilherme. You are a partner. We talked about this yesterday in the afternoon with FGV Agros. So I'm going to give you the floor to give us your opinion. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Diogo, thank you very much for the partnership and the opportunity. So looking at the agro sector and looking at the general balance in COP, we can see a very positive scenario, the way that the sector was able to show what has been done, what is being done for a long time, with the support of research coming from Embrapa and other institutions. So it became very clear how, an environment that did not exist to the insurance market, it became clear that, Brazil has had a plan for a long time of low carbon agriculture, already thinking about the issue of adaptation and how you're going to bring solutions based on nature to follow up the production. So I think this was a very important mark, and this association between research, the academic world, the private sector, and the executive sector, the execution sector, actually, that are going to make this agenda work. I think there's a very important point as well, especially regarding deforestation, and it is basically the payment of the environmental sectors that need to come in as an equation. And this is going to help not only the small companies, but also the medium and large companies as well. So it's going to go through the whole structure in the agricultural and livestock sector. In our country, we have more than 60% that is preserved of the lands, and there's nothing like this in the world. and we're able to keep the leadership and production with this commitment. But for us to move forward in this agenda and also thinking about what is in excess of what the legal code predicts, we need this incentive for these producers so that we can have an evaluation and with the opportunity of not progressing. So I think this is the way of engaging the agenda and to be able to move forward. Now, talking about insurance, I think it's an extremely important topic. We know that in rural insurance, we have a huge problem in terms of reduction of resources that are available for the premiums, and that's very serious. Otherwise, you don't have a product that is economically feasible on the side of the insurance companies, on the side of the producers, the farmers that need to hire this service, so this insurance service. So that is essential for us to be able to move forward, and definitely that's going to be a topic to be debated next year. Now, about funding, climatic funding, we have heard a lot about this, and I think this is a moment where the world is looking. So I am knocking on the door of Brazil. There's a huge potential there of resources for investment in agriculture and livestock, and it's only 6% of what has gone to this area, and it's a solution that is important for you to guarantee food safety and energy safety. And thinking about this transition, getting away from the fossil fuels, agriculture is also part of this. And there's a role of agriculture, not, fuel against food. Here in Brazil, tropical agriculture shows that it's possible to have this complementary partnership and having a circular economy where you produce food and then you have the subproducts that come in for animal feed or for the production of biomass that produces energy. So this is a very important point, showing how we can contribute towards this agenda and maintaining this food safety and energy commitment. So I think about this, we see this in a very positive manner, and we also have a way of doing it. So this is very important in terms of the farmers, and we are going into a discussion in the Champions League. So the sector is going to have to refine and will have to act more and with data. So I've heard a lot about metrics. So that is very difficult for the sector. This also inhibits the entry of the insurance sector. So yesterday in the panel that I moderated about technology, we can see how much technology is going to be inserted to be able to help improve our coverage and also being able to bring this funding and the funding so that it can actually leverage the use of these solutions in this tropical agriculture area. Thank you, Guilherme. That was very interesting. The panel yesterday was very interesting. And, we're talking about the tools, and the insurance sector also has tools, and we have to work together. It's another task force that we're going to have after the COP, and we organized that yesterday, right? So I'm going to ask Luis Pires, our partner from Ambima, to talk now, because sustainable funding is a pillar for banks, for insurance companies, for capital markets, and we've worked on this intensively. So I'm going to give you the floor so that we can wrap up the funding center, and then Professor Goretti is going to say a few words, and Marcelo, you're gonna be at the end. Yeah, it's a challenge for you, but we're going to have some time because we're going to leave you some time. Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Claudia. So I could not start, I cannot start without congratulating you for this discussion. And this is how I see the end of COP, right? In the end, I'm very optimistic, and everybody is looking at this in the same way. And I think we were able to bring a structure for this discussion. So the organizations that are structured, the companies are structured, and it shows we have many roadmaps available. And it's a discussion that maybe everyone has in capital markets. So is there a roadmap for that? Well, there are many roadmaps, I think. It's plural, right? And we have lots of pathways to follow. So we were able to show this structure, and looking at this connection between capital markets and the insurance industry, the whole market in general. And we were able to also, hand out our cards, not only be present. So we appeared, we discussed things, but it was still very shy, and we didn't have the building of a path. And we start to build this path, very assertive path. So who went through the different areas, you can see that we are offering many solutions. So we have the insurance companies were able to say, oh, look at this. There's something interesting here. I have products for this. So we were able to present lots of commitments, and we have the demonstration of many products. And as a result, I think we have the opportunity of making it happen. So it's the opportunity to remove future commitment. We're transforming this into reality now. And it has a lot to do with the support that we've been receiving and all the structuring we got from the Brazilian government. So ecological transformation, taxonomy, so sustainable taxonomy. I had to write it down because there are so many things. Also the investment platform and creating different pathways, the carbon market being put into practice, TFF being born with money, and that was a great question, and the proposal of funds for adaptation. So look at the structure that was placed, that was built for us to be able to operate and make the transition. So when I see all of this, I think, what are we going to have next year? And answering what you said initially, we're going to have a lot of work. And I'm very happy about it. I think it creates opportunities, and I think there are many, but I would like to highlight a few of them. So I think it is important I don't see the lack of capital. I think the investment industry in Brazil has about $2 trillion in assets, and it's a lot of resources. And these resources, they bring us opportunities, but I believe, and I think there's an invitation for us to discuss this in a structured manner, how capital markets can actually make it feasible in the offering of products for the insurance markets and applying the techniques and making more resources feasible all the time. So these are funding mechanisms that are being placed, and they're beginning to create more interest. And in a way, it is structured, and we can do it. We can do this in a coordinated manner. There was a lot said about blended finance in the insurance industry. So to make this institutional safety available, and as a result, we can look at 2026, and I'm looking at it with a lot of expectations. And I believe that we were able to do a good job here, and we're going to have good evolution in the future. So once again, congratulations to the people from CNseg that made all this happen. Thank you, Luis. And you talked about blended finance. What Brazil did with EcoInvest, it is a model of blended finance that GCF and CNseg, they should look at, because it becomes more effective. You have an auction, and then you can leverage capital. So that is the homework that Brazil showed in COP about blended finance, and it could be copied and used by sovereign funds to leverage capital. So I'm going to give the floor to Rodrigo from Maclima to give us his vision on things and about what was said by Diogo in the beginning. Thank you. So I'm going to take advantage that we're talking about we're in a high-level discussion. I'm going to bring some questions up. Sometimes, I'm still going to talk about the office, and we're still talking about climate, and we are supporting different negotiation points. So listening to you, I also start reflecting upon what has happened in the last conferences, and also based on the last ones that I've participated in, I think it would be interesting to highlight the amount of literacy we've shown. And the experience in COP30 has shown this live. So we're looking at adaptation in the practical sense. We are getting away from this empty rhetoric of what mitigation means. We're trying to find concrete elements and also deep diving and bringing this into our daily lives. And in this literacy, in this universe that we're learning in, we're getting away from empty words to a more interesting environment. So for the people who are not following up these multilateral negotiations, they definitely will bring a consensus, but the messages are very important and they are perennial. So Marcelo said this, we've been trying for a long time, to get a roadmap with fossil fuels, and we have improved. So I think we have to highlight that this movement is bringing a message, which means that the assumptions that were placed in the negotiations, they're in vain. They were actually thought about, and they had a very important message. And where I see there's a first gap in terms of this literacy is how we carry this message to our daily universe. So sometimes we're not able to make this tangible in terms of our regulation, our legislation, and maybe even more difficult to put it into our daily practice. So this literacy that we have that is great about some big subjects, this has become, adaptation is the new thing. Now, I am very concerned about this literacy that we're not working on. And the ministry and several organizations and GV and some companies, in fact, they have done this with items and topics that are just as important, and they've already been discussed. For example, the topic of capacity building and transparency, reporting. So we talked a lot about funding, and we talked a lot about the carbon market, and when, how many people read Article 13, or how many people know what a BTR is, or they actually read the biannual report that Brazil provided, and it's incredible work that Lakima did, comparing all of the BTRs of the 21st economies that have more than 80% of the emissions. So I'd like to conclude in the practical sense, because where are we going with this kind of understanding? It's an agenda of perception and trying to understand what is happening and migrating to this action agenda. And then I'm going to paraphrase something that I think makes sense, and this is in the high level in the insurance. So we talk about common responsibilities, but they are differentiated. At some point, we're going to come out of responsibility and we're going to move on to liability, which is the language of insurance, right? And insurance has a great advantage and one disadvantage. The great advantage is that it works as a mitigator for this. So it is one of the first ones that are going to receive this irresponsibility that becomes a liability. And more than that, bringing this perception of prevention, how are we able to bring this literacy from our level to a higher level? So I think COP30 has several elements, very interesting elements compared to the last 10 that I participated in. The fact that we're here discussing topics that we did not discuss 5 years ago. Bioeconomy, biodiversity is in this roadmap for climate, and in Armenia, it's also going to be a very important topic. But we're not going to have to wait. We're not going to wait for the public policies to act. We have to act with the elements that we already have that are already available, the Treaty of Paris and the Convention, although many people still want to renegotiate the Treaty of Paris and other conventions and other subjects that have been consolidated. So this kind of literacy, the insurance companies can definitely rule in Brazil and in other countries too. Professor Goretti, I'm going to give you the floor now for you to wrap up before we start the interventions. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you very much, Diogo, for the invitation of being here once again. It's an honor and it's a challenge. Yeah. But let's see how I deal with challenges. So first of all, perceptions about COP. I saw it in a good light. I saw the participation of the academic world. It was present, it was great, and they were present in several panels and in COP in general. So we saw the public power as well, and the economy, and the disclosing of programs. We also saw the participation of the academic world here in insurance, where most of the panels, or all of them, had representatives from the academic world. We also saw in the agri-zone the participation of Embrapa, with examples of technology and innovation. And it is a global example that Brazil gave. It was they really did very well, showing what innovation in the business is. And I was very happy when in the presentation about the concept of tropical agriculture, the person who was presenting started by saying that tropical agriculture is the one that is based in science. And when you hear Embrapa talk, we understand why. So the perception is that in terms of global objectives, science is moving together with the public power, with the private sector in these challenges, either in maintaining the 1.5 degree or 1 degree, as our colleague said here in the panel, of the increased temperature, or in funding, because green funding, we already have the challenge of funding, traditional challenge. So if we're talking about macroeconomic stability or government deficits, but green funding brings an additional component, which is risks. So when we talk about green funding in general, we're talking about new technologies. So if it's new technologies, I have an additional risk for funding. And once again, the academic world is working strongly to support the development of this instrument that is so important for this climatic transition. Reduction of deforestation and the commissioning of forests, that's also extremely important in the academic world. And in the transition from fossil fuels, several researchers are working on this subject. The foundation made a publication that you have access to here in the House of Insurance. It's also on the internet in the Fundação Getúlio Vargas platform, where you have more than 40 researchers from the foundation from all over Brazil talking about these 6 topics and the strategic objectives as well from COP. So the academic world is really has a strong presence in this contribution. And besides that, if we look at the participation in the COP exceptions, in the pavilions, we have contributions from dozens of researchers, and this moves on to hundreds of researchers. So that's a very positive fact. This COP has shown that public policies based on evidence. This is not only a vague concept, it's a concept that is being applied in Brazil, and a concept that brings advances where everybody wins. And the academic world has shown us how to bring this evidence and how to transform them into benefits for society. Another strong message from COP is that it is a global challenge, but the action has to be local. That's very important. So the challenges that we have now for implementation and action at the local level, this is all very relevant. And the public power has already manifested itself about this. We have the initiative of the Ministry of the Environment about the climate plan and moving this to cities, green cities, and then passing this on to municipalities. We also have the Ministry of Cities that is adapting. So the notion that it is necessary to act locally as well, that's also very present. And I also connect this to COP31, the challenge that we have, which means to deepen this relationship, this closeness to the academic world, so that data collection and data processing and analysis of the data so that it becomes even more productive, even more efficacious in the sense of public policies at the municipal level. Now, when we're talking about making this transport system in a city more efficient, or when we're talking about improving the housing conditions, removing people from areas that have risk associated or putting them very far from the centers they work in, this also reduces the emissions in the city. But at the same time, we can talk about adaptation when we talk about intelligent drainage, reduction of losses, reuse of water, treatment of waste, and generation of distributed energy. And I saw in the Finland panel nuclear fusion for distribution of generation. So it's a relevant contribution from science for energy transition to reduce the dependence on fossil fuels. So in this sense, the challenge for 2031, and also in the insurance sector, a lot has been said about parametric insurance that has been contributing to insurance against great environmental catastrophes that have become more frequent and more intense as well. And for the development of this kind of insurance, what do we need? We need to collect data. So today I saw examples. Actually, the week before COP, I was at an event with 28 European mayors, European and Asian mayors. And one point that came up, the mayor from a European city, he mentioned every time it rains more than 11 millimeters in 1 hour in this region of my city, I know that I'm going to have flooding. So the data collection system is extremely precise. And for example, if I talk about parametric insurance, what is the challenge? It is the trigger. What is the trigger for you to unlock this insurance? So the collection of data at the local level, and we have to go beyond cities, because cities like Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo, which are megalopolies, they need data collection in terms of areas in the cities. So this kind of data collection and processing and analysis, it's relevant for the academic world, it's useful for the insurance world, and it's extremely important to identify and to correctly mitigate the risks for funding as well as for pricing of the insurance. So what we need is to work more, and the roadmap to COP31 is the coordination of actions, because I talked about several actions, the Ministry of the Environment, the Ministry of the Cities, the Ministry of Mines and Energy. We have to coordinate all of these actions that have to do with public policies, collect more data so that these policies can become based on evidence, and to make the actions or that the global objectives be reached through local actions. Thank you, Professor Goretti. And we have a challenge because we have 17 minutes and 35 seconds, and we organized events in the morning and in the afternoon, and we were able to follow the time. We delayed very little, so I think we're going to be able to do it today. We're going to open up for questions, and then Butch is going to wrap up our discussion here. So we're going to open up for questions and comments. So Juliana has already asked for the microphone, and Vitória is writing down whoever wants to interact. So Juliana from CNseg, please, and Diogo as well. Yes, Victoria are on the list. Thank you, Rodrigo. Good morning, everyone. It was an excellent panel, lots of insights, and I only wanted to bring a contribution as well, a positive, provoking, because now we have the challenge of translating these messages and keep moving forward. And an important point in terms of the reading is that we have consolidated trends, and the colleagues talked about this very well, the issue of transition and getting away from fossil fuels. So that is a consolidated sign already. And the adaptation towards climate, losses and damage, everything has to do with insurance, but it's also important to look at the emerging trends. So I want to bring the issue of when there's a climatic crisis and the loss of nature, that's, two sides of the same coin. And it's very important for us to make a call to action, bring all of the professionals, people, the accountants, the actuarial professionals, because we can't keep looking backwards. Risk analysis and pricing nowadays is still based on the historical series, and it is very clear that that's not enough. So how can we bring these professionals into the discussion and really take on new assumptions? And there's no one better than you guys to deal with the complexity. The fact that we still depend on metrics and data, and I recognize that these are bottlenecks and they cannot stop us from moving forward. So we really need to take a look at this trend. So I would like to invite you all, and I'm also available so that we can look at nature as an asset and then a financial hedge and accelerate these financial flows as much as possible, because I think it's an opportunity. We have to look at the risk, but we also have to look at the opportunity for insurance and the funding sectors, and we have to become partners in this transition for us to be able to guarantee that these technologies and these solutions that adhere to green economy, they can actually access the market and capital markets, and capital as well, because nowadays it's not satisfactory and it's still more expensive. And then we have an initiative called Lab. It's an accelerator in Brazil, and it shows that regenerative practices, they have a return on investment of 19%, but this payback, it takes longer. And in the first few years, this producer will have losses, there will be reduction in productivity, and they cannot take this on alone. That's why the insurance sector is so important to be able to be together and to accelerate this transition. And in the same way as well, the ecological transformation of the sectors as a whole. So how can we offer incentives and economic stimuli to be able to accelerate this transition and to come out of the business as usual? So I wanted to give you this invitation and say that we are available to make this dialogue with the economies. So if you're going to have more than 100 companies, we are part of the global board, global council, and definitely finance and world economy will definitely help in accelerating this. Thank you. I have a list. Did you want to say what you have to say, Diogo? I wanted to make a few quick comments. So starting with this last one that Juliana said, I'm very optimistic about the evolution of these discussions at COP, exactly because of the comment that Juliana just made, because of the following. I'm going to get a phrase from Luis. Luis said, we don't have any capital missing. We have enough capital. In the Brazilian market, we have $2 trillion of capital. So we can pay for everything that we're talking about. We can fund everything. And there's something very interesting about money, because money is recycled. It is recyclable. So the money that funds Goretti's home, it is not transformed into powder. It goes back to the funding system, and then it finances Guilherme's house, and then it goes on to finance the next house. So money does not disappear. It's always sufficient. There's no demand in terms of financial resources that cannot be provisioned. So what is the problem here? The problem is risk, the allocation of risk. And that's where the risk agenda that everybody talks about. So you have to, that's my criticism, Juliana. So how far can we go and think about categories? We're not going to do the de-risking, right? When you talk about solutions based on nature, bioeconomy, you're not de-risking a category, you are only de-risking a project. So we're only going to get to the feasibility of this business when we can come and say, okay, here I'm talking about the plantations of acai in the Amazon. Okay, is that what we're going to work on? Okay, so let's design something and we can find a solution for this, a concrete solution. And that's why I'm very optimistic with the way this COP developed, because I can see this kind of discussion happening all over the place, right? So I think when we're able to connect the financial system, the insurance sector, and project promoters, we are going to find the solution. And I wanted to say that Brazil is a country that has had great solutions. Brazil maybe has one of the biggest energy programs, solar energy and wind energy in the world. And how did they do this? This was done through a program called Proinfa that established an auction of buying solar energy. So it was not something, oh, renewable energies. No, it's solar energy. Why? Because the cost was different from wind energy. So there was a program for wind energy, there was an auction for wind energy and solar energy. And then the auction came out and it's going to be bought and there's cash flow. And then the bank can fund that. So we have to go down to what's concrete, the objective. So just two funny things here. Marcelo talked about dinosaurs, flying dinosaurs, right? Those times. And I wanted to just get this joke and talk about the fossil fuels. Definitely, our era is going to be called by historians as the era of the barbarians who burned oil, because oil is such a fantastic product, and burning it one day is going to be considered barbarous. So that's one thing I wanted to say. And finally, I wanted to talk about the optimism I have with the participation of science in this discussion. And I think that negotiations are very complex. And the negotiations in COP, they began to have many interconnected subjects that sort of self-block, because, you know, he wants to get something on one side and then he renegotiates the other side and he blocks things. So I think the capacity of the countries to build an agreement, a global agreement in terms of emissions today, we have to say that it's not really very close yet. But I really believe in technology. I think that we are producing technology that is going to solve this. And once again, that's why I'm very optimistic, because I see the private sector engaged. I think it will come from there, from science, from the companies, the participation that people are showing. So it's our action that is really going to find solutions that we need. And I can see us really finally going down to the level of objectivity. So we are objective in our discussions, we're focusing on solutions, and that's how we're actually going to create the roadmap. And of course, the insurance sector, I'd like to call the attention of the insurance sector, which is everywhere. You talk about risk and funding, it's the insurance sector that is here. And when you talk about catastrophes and adaptation, and we're going to talk about prevention, you know, the biggest expert in disaster prevention is the insurance sector. And the one that is most interested is the insurance sector, because preventing disaster, you know, that's what avoids flooding, right? So I think we're going into this debate with a vision of full participation of the insurance sector in the different areas of this discussion about climate. And I'm very optimistic about finding solutions if we really focus objectively on the problems and we get away from this very high-level or theoretical discussions. Thank you, Diogo. And now I'm going to give the floor to Juliana from Marciano from ACX. Good morning. Thank you for your very valuable reflections. And I'd like to ask about the objectivity of these solutions being debated in the last 2 weeks. Very good discussions, very diversified and very holistic, but I'm very concerned when you have an attempt at an operation or an off-taker or some kind of international party when we talk about data governance. So that is a layer that still comes up in almost all the discussions that we have. And it is a risk layer, and it is an uncertainty when we're dealing with different types of operations in the infrastructure of environmental assets. So I liked what the professor said about the metrics and the data. How can we move forward with everything that is being presented here? How can we build this data governance and in general for us to be able to have an environment, to be able to do research, to collect all of the parameters that the insurance sector will also need, and it will be safe and consistent without depending on political cycles or some bigger or smaller interest in the climatic agenda. So I'm going to pass it on to you and then to Fernando, okay? You also work with this. He was also in the list. Thank you. That was an excellent point, an excellent question as well. And I would say that today, I think that we have a way of advancing in this topic. And through the Fundação Getúlio Vargas, we have worked with the possibility of maintaining the data anonymous, using cryptography technology to be able to receive the data and work on it. But I think this has to be more, well, we have to advance more on this issue because this is what we were talking about yesterday, right? There was a panel with Raquel present as well, and there's a lot of information that is collected by the machines through telemetrics. It's registration of what the farmers are doing, what the producers are doing, and unfortunately, we don't have access to that. So whenever we have access to that, they are going to benefit as well. And maybe we need to encourage them so that they will authorize the use of the information. So then I think we'll be able to have a positive agenda for use and for you to allow the data to be used. Thank you. And who systematizes that? Well, ideally, I think it's the government, right? The government should have an impartial way. And I think we have a ministry that was built, MGI, which is a very important ministry in terms of managing the registrations. I think it could be that. In the agricultural ministry, we have a more sustainable platform. And over there, we can also work with them. And what we can do is the academic world and the private sector can help the public sector to carry out this very important role of being able to share the information. So that's an excellent point. Okay, the last question before we close. So for Professor Fernando Teixeira from São João del Rei University, you can talk a little bit about data, and he made a partnership with us in our platform in the social and environmental issues as well as climatic issues. Hi there, good morning. I loved the question, and I've been working on this for a few years. We started with a partnership with the Ministry of Agriculture and the federal government, looking at the ProAgro data and, computing sciences, and we're systematizing things. And definitely it's a huge challenge because we have a volume of data that is complex and it's huge. So Brazil has data in several ministries and institutes, and just like the professor said, the challenges are global, but action has to be local, and we have to verify the data that we have. We have to analyze it. So the database from ProAgro and Bacin, and the information that we have about private insurance from SUSEP. And recently we made a partnership with CNseg, and they have been investing in this innovation project with São João del Rei University. And we accepted this challenge. We're analyzing the data, and this involves people from the environmental area, from the computing area, and there are different faces to this problem. We have the part of using technology in our favor, and there's also the fact that we have to understand the data deeply to be able to cross the data, and then you can generate information, right? With some precision. And we're talking about what Diogo said. We're launching a platform where we're able to, just like the people from abroad, we can do this in Brazil. So according to the zip code, according to the different rural areas, we can say where the risk of flooding is and how the socio-environmental aspect is doing. So if it's indigenous land or a quilombola land, or if it's in a place that it's a unit of conservation. So this is being done in my city for many years. And with the partnership that we did with CNseg, we are generating practical innovation to be able to move forward in this social environmental agenda in Brazil. So already talking about the production that is possible, and there's a huge challenge of looking at the extreme events now. So we started with flooding, but the idea is to work with other extreme events as well, using the basis from the federal government, the data, and this is very complex to integrate and to keep in a way that will be available for the population in general. So congratulations on the panel. And I really wanted to participate when I saw all of you, and that's it. Thank you, Professor Fernando. Butch, the floor is now yours for us to conclude this very high-level panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claudia. I'm not going to summarize the rich discussion, but I was listening to everyone, and I can share what I think would be a way forward. I think since we're in the House of Insurance and the role of the insurance industry, I'm going to be focusing on that. I think the global insurance industry is now living more and more and realizing the importance of the 4 principles for stable insurance that were launched in Rio in 2012. If you look at the structure of the principles, it's based on the spheres of influence of an insurance company. 1 is, what do you do with your own business, the way you insure, the way you invest. 2, even if you do it within your company, it's not going to work because you need to work with the entire value chain, with your clients, with your business partners. Principle 3 says that even if the entire global insurance industry embeds sustainability in its core insurance and investment functions, it's not going to be enough. It says we need to work together with governments, regulators, civil society to promote widespread action. And principle 4 is about accountability and transparency, about accountability to your employees, to your workers, to your shareholders, to your society, accountability increasingly to this generation and to future generations. So if you apply those 4 principles, that doesn't have to be insurance principles. That could apply to any company in any sector, and actually even to the public sector. So going back to the idea of establishing this international task force, which we will do. This circle is a good idea of what it would look like. We think that, and we're seeing in the sustainable insurance movement, we've seen that evolve over the years. When the PSI was launched, it was largely and focused on insurers within the industry. Last year, we established a new forum at UNAP where the tent is wider. Now the regulators are there, civil society is there. The task force would become even wider than that. The structure, to my mind, would be along the following lines. 1 would be those who understand and manage risk and practice. This would be insurers. Those who study risk and inform society. That would be the scientific and academic community. Those who have to manage the public consequences. This would be finance ministries, central banks, governments, international financial institutions, and the UN system. Those who represent communities, civil society, and those who represent the real economy, the wider business community. That is what I think the task force should look like. And the reason why it should be like that is because I think we've come to realize, I've been around in the sustainable finance movement for a long time already, ever since the principles for responsible investment were launched by then UN Secretary General Kofi Annan in the New York Stock Exchange, and also the principles for stable insurance in 2012. I think there was a view before that sustainable insurance and sustainable finance in general, once you make it more sustainable and green, would then translate to a sustainable economy. I think the answer to that is no, it's not going to happen. It will help. It will help, and it can start the process, but ultimately the transition to an inclusive, resilient, and sustainable economy is a team sport. Everyone has to do their part. So if the governments don't do their part, or the insurers don't do their part, or business doesn't do their part, that transition won't happen in the way that will be sustainable for all of us. So I think the mindset that we need to have now, because ultimately we need to be informed by science. If I read the if I read it correctly, I think one of the most famous Brazilian scientist, Carlos Nobre, has indicated that Amazon could become a savanna-like ecosystem in as early as, I think, 15 years or so. That is, if you just think about that, it's so green at the moment and everything. That is a disaster that we don't want to happen, I think. So, and listening to scientists during this COP, what I heard was that we need to really think in exponential terms. So if we are thinking here around the room or outside, if you're still thinking about incremental change, then I think we are part of the problem. We cannot be happy with incremental change. We need to think about exponential change to really avert the climate and nature crisis. And I think this has to be the mindset. We know there has been improvement, there's been progress, but if we continue in a linear way, we're not going to turn the corner. And so we need to really think about scale and speed, and that can only happen if we think exponentially. So in parting, I'll share also a personal side, as I've done in much of the summit. I think the Amazon has been a source of strength for me. So when we launched the PSI in 2012, actually I went to the Amazon afterwards. And that was also the day that I quit smoking to be more sustainable myself. So I remember I went to the flooded area of the Amazon in Mamirawa, where I saw some botos and everything. And it really gave me a lot more optimism and source of energy to move forward. So now people say that you need to do forest bathing, and it does a lot of you. So coming back to the Amazon here has given me a renewed sense of vigor, a sense of hope, and a better sense of optimism. And I've seen this change already in just a matter of weeks and a few months. So I have 2 young daughters, and we had a really fun family vacation recently. And I normally write to them a postcard wherever I go. I think snail mail is still very important. So I don't count WhatsApp or text as writing to them. So they've now collected a series of postcards from me about where I go and what I do. It's a snapshot in time. So I was very happy on the last vacation because they're very young. They're just 5 and 3, and so they were well behaved, and they were respectful of the people that they met. And so in the next trip that I had, I wrote to them a postcard. So I said, "I'm so happy that you enjoyed that trip with Mama," and then I wanted to end and saying that I think you'll have a bright future ahead of you. But I stopped because knowing what I know, it was hard to probably say or to lie and say, if I know that the future is going to be bleak because of where we are right now, why will I write that? So, but that changed because of the past 2 weeks. I was in the green zone. By the way, if you go to the green zone, you can send postcards for free from here. So I wrote a postcard actually with the Amazon. So you can select the cards. And this time I ended on a note saying that I think with what I'm sensing here and what we can do going forward, and the global Muchirao, I ended that in saying that I think there is a hope that your generation and future generations would have a livable future where you can lead healthy and productive lives with dignity. So I thought I should end that because we are in the Amazon, and I think it's important to get that source of strength in us that we can make this work, and that hope springs eternal. So Joga's point about finance being um, recyclable and renewable, that's absolutely true. But I also believe that one thing is not renewable, which is time. Time is not renewable. So tomorrow is too late. And so I think the call to action is to do things today. Thank you.
Muito obrigada a todos e
Thank you
boa
very
viagem
much,
para quem
everyone,
voltou.
and have a good trip home. Some people have already gone back, and see you in the next
Trabalho pela
COP.
frente.
And there's a lot of work ahead of us.
Júlia, bora pra